Well, the votes have been cast and election 2016 is underway in the bi-state area. It was close on Tuesday and the path to the presidency is unclear. And of course, voters have many more decisions than just commander-in-chief. Local elections to decide, property taxes and bond issues are still on the horizon, as is the Missouri statewide primary. It's the kickoff to election 2016, so stay tuned.
Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the 9 network of public media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned. This week, both Illinois and Missouri got lots of attention from candidates from both parties as they crisscrossed the region, hoping to sway undecided voters before the primaries on Tuesday, and voters turned out in record numbers. Polarization seems on the ascent, too, between and in both political parties, as evidenced on social media. Anthony Daniels tweeted, "Am I the only one feeling alarmed after Donald Trump's success on Super Tuesday?" And Kim Marcoux wondered, why is it that Hillary supporters hate being reminded of what she sees as her lies and inconsistencies? In a Twitter conversation with Brittany Packnett, she commented that the toxicity of the political environment is turning people away from the democratic process. So what lies ahead in this election season? And what's at stake?
Okay, we've got a lot to talk about and only 30 minutes to do it. So let's make some introductions and we'll jump right in. Jason Rosenbaum, reporter with St. Louis Public Radio, and Joe Mannies with St. Louis Public Radio as well. Sandy Diamond joins us, and she is the program coordinator, Kids Voting Missouri, part of the University of Missouri, St. Louis. So we'll try to go maybe chronological-ish just a little bit, back up to Tuesday. It was close. We've learned late this week there will not be a recount from the Bernie Sanders campaign, even though they were well within the range that they could have.
Yeah, but there never was going to be a
never going to be one.
Anyway.
That was a non-issue.
That was a non-issue. Somebody who didn't really understand the state process kind of threw that out there early on. But the fact is, anybody involved in Missouri politics knows that it takes a month before an election is certified by the Secretary of State's office. So they wouldn't even be able to ask for a recount until April 15th.
So what is
and
the
by
fact
that time?
So what did it tell you that it was so close, though? What did the fact that Bernie came so close to beating Hillary? What did that say to all of you?
Well, I think it said that he had a lot of young voters and some labor activists and others who were very much behind him. I think it showed some dissatisfaction within the Democratic Party. There's also dissatisfaction within the GOP, but
close
it's different.
On that side too.
But it's different. Within the Democratic Party, Sanders represented, he was challenging the establishment, as is Donald Trump. The difference is that Sanders has generally been coming in second to Hillary, and most of the establishment Democrats, even though they're embattled, have managed to get her across the finish line, and that's what happened here.
Yeah, I was frankly kind of surprised about the Democratic result, not because I don't think Bernie Sanders is so far running a fairly excellent campaign given what he has, but because the demographics and organizational aspects of Missouri seem to favor Hillary Clinton pretty strongly. When you think about it, pretty much every major and minor Democratic politician endorsed Hillary Clinton, and you had many prominent labor organizations endorsing Hillary Clinton. And then in 2008, when she ran against then Senator Obama, she swept rural Missouri. And based off her newfound strength among African American voters, Missouri on paper should have been a slam dunk for her. But it turns out that Sanders does have a lot of appeal with younger voters. His message at trade apparently seems to be taking resonance across the state.
Which sounds a little similar to Donald Trump when you go to the rally.
A little bit.
Both of them, he and Trump, are both emphasizing trade, the dissatisfaction with the trade deals, that you have some people, especially middle-aged people, who lost their jobs within the last 20 years. Missouri's, all these small factories that used to be in rural Missouri, they're pretty much gone, and that's that way throughout the Midwest. And so both Trump and Sanders are sort of feeding on that dissatisfaction. They share it, but the point is it's from different viewpoints.
I look at it a different way because I run a K-12 youth voter program. And we had a few schools that voted in the presidential primary. We did a mock primary. It's amazing that the results are almost exactly the same. Hillary won the election, but she did not win by a large margin. Bernie Sanders came in second. So it's eerie to me. Kids don't normally vote the way their parents are voting, but it's still a way to look at the election. The other thing is the effect of social media on this election. When I work with the youth, that's all they're looking at. They're looking at social media. They're not watching any of the TV programs. They're not watching cable news. In fact, print media, 1% of the youth is looking at print media, where I think the Pew Research just did a study on this, and 35% of the youth of that age group are looking at social media. Both Bernie and Donald Trump both have significant social media campaigns on Facebook, on Twitter, on Snapchat,
Snapchat.
Snapchat.
Whatever these, yeah.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say we every week like to have you engage with us as well. Hashtag Stay Tuned STL, but maybe we'd be better off trying to find them with hashtag Stay Tuned STL than
And the
finding
other thing,
us.
as an educator, I think that you have to look at the old propaganda techniques. This is a clear election on both sides with the bandwagon technique that you might all remember from Civics 101. They're jumping on the bandwagon. Everybody's voting for them. You see that all the time. And I think that the young people want to be part of, they see, all the, pizzazz on the ads, the social media, and people want to be part of it. And I'm
part of the
talking
momentum.
Let me kind of jump on, again, the surprising aspects of this. When we think of rural Missouri and outstate Missouri, we think of a place where conservative candidates who are opposed to gun control and abortion will do well. Yet we had a Democratic socialist do well in rural Missouri, and we had a brash New York multi-billionaire who used to be pro-choice and for gun control win most of rural Missouri. And that strikes me that maybe A, those issues aren't as resonant as they used to be, and B, Sanders and Trump's populist message, their message on trade, must have resonated with some people.
Well, some of it, but I think also in Trump's case, I mean, because you've got two different situations. You've got Clinton, where the establishment managed to get her across the finish line. You've got, in the Republican primary, you've got Trump, who's not the establishment at all, and the Republican establishment couldn't get Cruz or anybody else. In fact, most of the establishment in the state on the Republican side, the largest bloc, had been for Rubio, and that's only because they had all been with Jeb Bush, and after he went out. So I think in Trump's case, while he's talking trade and he's feeding on people's satisfaction, he's kind of tapped into the Tea Party movement, which was dissatisfaction with trade, dissatisfaction with immigration, dissatisfaction with a whole bunch of stuff. Just people that are really angry about everything.
Like, the Tea Party movement was all about principled stands, and how many times has Donald Trump changed his position in a series of debates?
So can you take anything from this and look ahead to our statewide primary, or even the general election, if it's Trump and it's Clinton, how might those candidates affect people down the ballot?
Well, now, Missouri's primary is in August, and there's no presidential in there.
Sure.
So
but the
that will
sentiment
be
we've seen in this past election, does it tell you anything about August, or would the general be affected?
Well, it might in the Missouri Republican primary, which today I was writing a story about sex slaves. So I mean, the Republican primary for governor and also the Republican primary for attorney general, there is a lot of passion there, and there's a lot of turmoil in there. It's different than the presidential, but it's still tapped into that, among many voters, that anger. I think in November, it's really unclear how much of a coattail effect there's going to be. I'm not sure.
Frankly, the Democrats don't need to win Missouri to win the presidency anymore. Barack Obama proved that in 2008 and 2012. So I don't think either of us foresee the National Democratic Party putting a lot of
Paying
resources.
attention to us.
But if if the result of the presidential race is close or Hillary Clinton wins Missouri, then it means that the nominee, whether it be Trump or Ted Cruz or, I don't know, whoever they choose at a contested convention, is just not resonating with voters.
Before we go too much farther, I want to circle back to what Sandy was saying about the young vote. Our producer Maya Northfleet sat down this week with some first-time voters, some first-time to be eligible voters. Not all of them have voted. Let's hear what they have to say, what they're feeling about 2016.
Who's planning on voting in the primaries this week? Okay, let's talk about that. Why aren't you voting in the primaries?
I actually would really like to. It kind of just like crept up on me, and I was hearing all about it, not really hearing any specific dates, and then it was kind of that thing where like I wanted to register to vote, but I didn't really know how.
What has motivated you to vote in the primaries?
Really? Everybody was just like, you should register to vote in the primaries, and I was like, all right, sounds good. So I just decided to register to vote.
Oh, I mean, I feel like it's important because you want to choose who the nomination is for whatever party that you're going to vote for. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was asking her if she was going to vote and who she was voting for, and she was like, "Oh, I don't vote." And I was like, "Well, I mean, why wouldn't you vote? And if you don't, you can't really complain about the situation."
What are the things that you're like really needing a candidate to pay attention to?
So I really don't like how our education system is currently set up, just the way that it's funded, and I don't like how like socioeconomic status can essentially determine the success of a child.
I feel like there's such a division in our country right now, and I want to see the United States become united again, honestly, because I don't think anything can happen until we all kind of see each other as people.
When I do talk to mostly adults, they try and like disregard the opinions of millennials, and people tend to think that some of the things that we want are unrealistic.
It's just because we don't vote. There's so many young people that don't vote.
How much have you been focusing on state elections? We have a new governor coming. Like, is that on your radar at all?
No.
No.
When you like look at local elections, all you see is like a bolded name on like a little piece of paper in front of somebody's front lawn. And so basically I would say with like local elections, you have to work a little bit harder to find information.
Ultimately, do you feel like your individual vote matters?
I think it's really important, and I think it's really important that more people realize that. I feel like so many people disregard that idea because they're like, no, one person can't make a change, that's ridiculous.
I'm just ready for it all to be over, really, because I mean, I feel like it really brings out like a crazy in people.
It does.
Like
It brings
the
out the
politics
worst
about
in
it.
people.
Yeah.
Like I was gonna put a Bernie sticker on the back of my car, and then I'm like, people gonna think I'm a socialist.
It causes so much
They might cut my
between people who like on any other day would get along and would just see each other as human beings and just like love each other and be chill. Like, oh my God, politics can just tear people apart. There's so much tension.
Prescient, whose fault is it? Is it our fault that the young people aren't necessarily engaged? Have we set a bad example? That doesn't seem like maybe something that's very appealing to get into.
I think that I see young people very engaged and then they get disillusioned, and that's what I'm afraid is going to happen as, you know, Bernie's camp has, you know, engaged a lot of students. In fact, they were saying in the articles that I've been reading that it's all the states with all the colleges, like there's some states with 400 universities, and he's appealing to all these college students. And what's going to happen if he is not the candidate? Are they going to come out and vote? You know, are they going to take their citizenship responsibility seriously and vote? You know, just exercise their right to vote.
If the excitement of Bernie is gone, will they still be engaged?
And that's what I'm very, very concerned about, because you saw that in the 2008 to 2012 election, where the young people came out in droves, 18 to 28-year-old, and voted for Obama. The numbers fell off in 2012. They just weren't as excited when he ran for re-election. So I am concerned. You know, it's up to us. It's up to all the educators that inspire the young people, both in high school and colleges, to try to get them to understand their civic responsibility, that it's the voting. It's becoming an informed voter and
You have to actually go to the ballot. You can't. You
exercise
can't
your
just be
right.
engaged on social
You
media.
have to make some choices and determine, which candidate is best for you.
But I think it's also up to the candidates as well. I think that the Clinton campaign, they will have a challenge. I mean, assuming that she continues with her lead, they're going to have a challenge to try to get the kids who've been energized for Sanders to at least come out and vote for Clinton. But this is an odd situation. I covered the Sanders rally last Sunday, and I was asking several of the attendees who were big Sanders fans, young people, and I asked them, if he doesn't get it, who's your second choice? Well, they all said they'll vote for Clinton. They're not going to vote for Trump. In fact, they hate him. So the one thing that may help her is that potentially you may have some of these young people turn out not because they're for Clinton,
against Trump.
But they're against Trump. But things can change. I mean, things can change so rapidly these days.
Let's go back to the governor's race for Missouri. We just barely touched on that for a second. From the outside, it kind of mirrors the national presidential race a little bit in that you've got a somewhat crowded Republican field and a fairly well-known and established smaller one mainly Democratic candidate.
There is technically a Democratic primary between Chris Koster and Leonard Steinman, who looks like Santa Claus. But you're right in that sense that there are four major Republican candidates: John Brunner, Peter Kinder, Catherine Hanaway, and Eric Greitens. And all four of them have their own strengths and weaknesses, but I would say that they're all viable candidates to win the nomination. And I would say that they're all viable potential gubernatorial winners.
Yeah, now what's interesting is that unlike in the presidential contest, all four of them are on the same page on virtually every major issue, from guns, abortion, taxes, right to work, you name it. They're all pretty much on the same page. So where they're trying to define differences is really personally, either how they're raising money or who some of their donors are. You've got, Greitens and Brunner, who are somewhat outsiders. Brunner right now is self-funding. He's a wealthy millionaire. You've got Hanaway, who's the only woman in the race, and emphasizing the fact that she's a prosecutor. And then you've got Peter Kinder as lieutenant governor. He says, I'm the only one of these people who's actually won statewide, and I've won 3 times statewide. And so they're all trying to fashion themselves as saying, I'm the best person to take on Chris Koster, the attorney general, who is really, in effect, the Democratic nominee.
And then Eric Greitens, who is, if I'm not mistaken, the most well-funded.
Yes.
Is he the most well-known?
No.
Is he known at all?
I think he's known in a similar way that Ben Carson was known, in the sense that he's a published author and has a following.
Has a following.
I'm not trying to, obviously Ben Carson was controversial during his campaign and flamed out, and I'm not saying Eric Greitens is going to do that, but what I'm trying to say is, when I went to see Ben Carson speak in St. Louis during the Eagle Forum convention, there were like hundreds of people who knew who he was and were really enthusiastic about him because they knew about his
Eric
story.
Greitens might be better known. He's on the late shows on the national television.
And Eric Greitens might be in a similar situation, but this is his first campaign, and we're finding out today that, because he has raised a lot of money and because people see him as a threat in the general election, I think that he's being the most attacked, and it's going to be.
Yes.
Is it going to be nasty like the national race?
I think some of it is. I mean, Greitens already has come under fire. First, he's a former Navy SEAL. So there's a group of Navy SEALs who produced a video. I wrote about this about a month ago to kind of
supposedly Navy SEAls. I think he was questioning.
I know, but it's a whole Swift boat thing,
right.
In effect. And they were challenging how he behaved and this and that. Of course, he has countered with his own video, and when he had his press conference, there was a bunch of local veterans who showed up in support. Now the big thing is, see, his biggest donor is a venture capitalist from California, and who's given him $1 million, $500,000 in 2 different installments. Well, the Republican challengers who don't have as much money, although Brunner is self-funding right now, so he's okay, they're attacking him because this California venture capitalist is now the subject of a lawsuit filed by an ex-stripper who claims that she was his sex slave for 13
Joe, you have
years.
so many juicy storylines that you are currently working on. We call this a tease in the business. I feel like we'll all be going to stlouispublicradio.com,
this
but
show is
.org.
going to have to be rated TV-14.
Right.
This is
after
okay.
a
All
while.
right. Well,
So
let's.
it was coming up in the debates. They're now all calling. The others are calling on him to return the money, and that was supposed to be the big hallmark at the most recent debate.
Yeah.
Okay, we had record turnout this past Tuesday for a Missouri presidential primary. Our other producer, Justin Hartman, sat down with a young man who is actually working on that. He's an artist, and he has a rather unique approach to try to improve voter turnout, because it still wasn't great if you look at the overall percentages.
The U-turn is it's a philosophy. It's an idea that I'm trying to spread throughout the entire community, throughout the entire city. That, you know, we can increase voter participation, you know, by creating civic responsibility, which will bring neighborhood cohesion. When I decided to develop the U-turn, it was in 2015, and I saw that there was 300,000 residents in our city, but only 180,000 are registered to vote. And in that primary, only 15,000 people came out to vote, which gives us a percentage of 9.1. So less than 10% of the city is making governmental, you know, decisions for everybody. This is a citywide project, man. No matter, you know, where you come from, no matter what your, you know, race, color, your age group, you know, it doesn't matter. What has to happen is that, you know, people have to understand that it's a collective effort, you know. When you've got less than 10% of the city, you know, voting and making decisions for everybody, that's not a racial thing. That's not a age thing, you know. That's a awareness thing, you know. People are not aware. So being a hip hop artist, you know, I feel like one of my civic duties is to make sure that people are aware of what's going on around them.
Shout out to all my homies off of Riverview and Broadway. Small city, big dreams, hoping you can make it. The superstar status, now you selling out the safest. Not too long ago, I was jumping off the stoop. Now I got my own star on the sidewalk in a loop. On my
So many of the, let's say, elders of the community were looking for somebody to come with some type of urban, positive message.
When it come to hustling, had to keep mine tight. Could have been a broke cat.
So, okay, so he hopes more people will vote. We're excited to talk about this right now. The people watching presumably are people in general engaged on these lower issues beyond Trump and Clinton?
When you say lower issues, like the city earnings tax?
Like the city earnings
I
tax.
think people do talk about it. I'm not sure the young people are talking about these issues, but it's up to educators to bring these issues to the forefront. And that's what we try to do in all of our schools, is try to get these young people to become informed voters, to know the issues, and then get them not, we don't tell them which way to go, but to try to get them to see both sides of an issue. And I really do think that that has to be brought to them. We have to tell them, you know, that PBS is on. We have I'm serious. I mean, if someone isn't the role model to tell the young people where to turn to get information. I'm not talking social media. Yeah. They do not know the difference
and
between...
these are the races that people will tell us affect our lives more than Clinton versus
Correct,
Trump.
Correct. In fact, in the whole debate over the earnings tax, I mean, it's going to be in the April ballot. The issue is whether or not to phase it out, as some want. And
the city says would be extremely detrimental to
the
city.
It's about 40% of their income. I mean, they're saying that in effect they'd have to get rid of the fire department. Rex Singfeld, who's a wealthy financier who has a house in St. Louis, has put up $2 million for the anti-earnings tax campaign. So they're buying TV ads, radio ads, flyers, they're paying for canvassers. They're really going to be pouring a lot of money. I mean, think about it, $2 million for just a city campaign, and the mayor and the people who are supporting the earnings tax are not going to be able to match that close.
So does it have a chance of going down? Does it have a chance? Does that effort have a chance of being
I
successful?
believe in 2011 it passed. I mean, the earnings tax was re-upped overwhelmingly, but there was no campaign. And,
Correct.
And I think the fact that there is a pretty aggressive no campaign now should incentivize people in St. Louis city government to kind of get up and start barnstorming.
Is there a plan B if they lose 40% of the city's budget?
No, because they would have to raise sales tax or do other things so high or cut services. So one of the things, I mean, dramatically, we're not talking little bit. We're talking dramatically. One of the reasons that there was no anti-earnings tax campaign in the city in 2011 is because at that point the mayor and some of the civic leaders were saying that they would talk over the next few years about maybe if there were
I think they said this is a warning. We have 5 years to figure out a way to do this, and really nothing's changed.
But really, they can't. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't an alternative. I'm just saying if they have not found one, because they would have to raise sales tax.
We have just a few seconds left. Tell me about the U.S. Senate race. Republican Senator Roy Blunt is up for re-election.
He's running against Secretary of State Jason Kander, a Democrat. I think he's only like 4 or 5 years older than me. In order for Kander to be competitive, the national Democratic apparatus is going to have to get behind him and provide him with enough funding, because Blunt is going to be well stocked. He's run statewide a bunch of times. He's going to be strong in Southwest Missouri, and it's going to be a challenge, but I don't think it's an insurmountable one.
Well, Kander is an ex-veteran and is really emphasizing that. And Kander has been on the attack for months, even if not everybody's paying attention to it. He's been really going after Blunt on everything from the fact his son is a lobbyist to Blunt's own lack of a military record during the Vietnam War, all that stuff. And it may be white noise right now, but I think they're basically testing themes to see what works.
And you said that the Democrats are not going to pay much attention to us in terms of the presidential race.
Right.
Does that have an impact on the Senate race?
Not necessarily, because if they do polling and find out that the Missouri Senate race is competitive, I think Kander will have enough resources in order to be competitive. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, in congressional races, the national parties loom large, and if you don't have their support and their money and organization, you're probably not going to win.
Yeah, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee is the major elephant in the room here, and so they've been paying very close and been doing some polling, as is the Republican counterpart.
We have to leave it there. Jason, Joe, and Sandy, thank you all for your time. Thanks for watching.